Okay, guys, welcome back. Week 2, so the second of 3 program level workshops that we're doing for you over this semester. The focus of today is going to be looking at assessment and feedback. That's quite important for you this year, obviously, because 2/3 of the weighting is actually on your degree classification is actually on this year, and also you probably will be coming across some assessments that you can't or you haven't actually had before. So things such as reflections, group presentations, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so what myself and the program team have done is to put together a kind of refresher really for you in terms of what we're looking for with assessments, what some of the pitfalls are, and to give you guys really the opportunity to ask some questions and really get those queries out there. So there's some lovely pictures of the 3 of us there. So we've got 3-year tutors. I don't know if you're actually aware of that, but I direct the whole program, and I've got 2 deputies, and we've got Christoforos Bouzanis there, who looks after the first years, and Desiree Cranfield at the bottom, who looks after the second years. And it's important for you to know who those people are, because if for some reason I'm not around, if I get ill or whatever, then these are the people that will be able to help you and to guide you. So I look after year 3 and the whole of the program. Okay, so also we are going to be doing some little Slido polls. I have got some exercises for you specifically around referencing that I want you to try and have a think about later. The session should take hour and a half-ish, hour and a quarter. So I'm not going to be keeping you here for 2 hours, but it is important that you engage from that perspective. Okay, so outline, what we're going to be looking at. Just move that down there so that everybody can see. So the types of assessment that you're going to come into contact with this semester and this year. Marking criteria and rubrics. Okay, I'm not going to ask for any hands up, but suffice to say, whenever I ask final year students what a rubric is or where they can find the rubric, not many of them can actually answer that question. I'm guessing you guys will be able to answer that question because you're the ones who are engaged, but just to go over that and how we as academics actually mark your work and maintain standardization. How to do well in different types of assessments. There are different skill sets that you need for each particular type of assessment. And that's the reason why there are so many, why we don't just give you exams across the board, because exams only tell us that you can digest information and then spew it back out to us. It doesn't tell us how you apply it or your thinking processes around that, okay? So we're going to look at the different skills that you need for each of those assessments. We're going to look at a little bit of researchers' theory. Okay, we're in our 3rd year now, so our experience of academic life should be moving more towards generating your own knowledge. Okay, not just taking what other people have said and regurgitating it, but actually thinking about applying your own thoughts to various different situations. Okay, so that is all about research in essence, and it's a starting point for research. Certainly, if any of you are thinking about going on to do a master's or higher, then the full research process is something that you're going to have to think about. Fair assessment, okay? What we do to make sure that the assessment that you get is fair, that it's unbiased, okay, that is based on the content of your work and not on any bias situation that might be there. And feedback. Okay, so how we give feedback, why we give feedback, and the processes that you can go through to make sure that you take that feedback that's given to you and do something constructive with it. Now I've got a little activity for you at the end, okay, which is going to be around referencing and whether or not you think that something should be referenced or how it should be referenced. Okay, so let's just do a recap. There are two different types of assessment, and they are equally as important. Okay, so we've got the ones that you guys are always thinking about, which are the summative assessments. So these are assessments that we use to make sure, as far as we can, that you have understood and met the learning objectives for that module or for that degree program. Okay, so that's the basis for us. We look at what the learning objectives are. Each module has its own learning objectives, and the program overall has its learning objectives. Okay, so for us, measures whether a student has met those learning outcomes, and gives us the ability to tell you how to make improvements. Okay, so it's not that we're trying to fail you. In fact, it's the exact opposite. We're trying to pass you. Okay, so that's where the feedback comes from. For you, understand your overall performance in a unit of study, and for you also to understand whether or not you've met those learning outcomes, those learning objectives. Okay, so this is why the module handbooks for each of your modules are so important. And again, vast majority of students don't look at the module handbook other than trying to find out when the assessments are due and what the assessments are. Formative, on the other hand, is where you are given an assessment, but the marks that you get for it don't go towards anything. So a lot of students will think to themselves, well, why am I doing this? It's just taking up my time. It actually feeds into the summative assessment. Okay, so it's for us to be able to look at various different points along your learning journey and to make sure that progress is happening. Also, to try and understand from our perspective if there's some common threads with what we're teaching that perhaps we haven't got across well enough. So is everybody getting a question on financial accounting wrong? Or is everybody getting a question on project management wrong? So it gives us feedback as well from that perspective. It also, from your side, helps you to evaluate your own learning, build knowledge, and so on. So the module that I am coordinating this year, the final year project, has got a formative assessment in it. It's got two actually. For next semester, hopefully we'll be able to do the final year project fair, which will assess, from my perspective, your ability to be able to communicate what your program is all about. Okay, and from your perspective, to give you some skills in exhibition theory. Okay, and they cross over. So we've got a Venn diagram there, obviously. They're both ways of assessing learning. They are both opportunities for you to get feedback and also give feedback to us as well. And they are ways for us as staff to evaluate effective ways of teaching. So we're not just doing it because we are trying to give you more work to do. We're doing it so that we can guarantee the quality, essentially, of the degree that you come out with. Okay, so types of assessments that you could come across, certainly this year. Okay, so there's the normal essay question exams, and you will get some of those, obviously. You might get open book exams. Certainly this semester, because we are looking at the Extraordinary Assessment Protocol, the EAP as we call it, how to make sure that, let's say everybody's locked down and you can't actually come in, how are we going to manage your assessments? Certainly if you've got an exam. Okay, do we change that to another type of assessment that's coursework based? Or do we let you do that examination yourselves as a take-home exam? Or do we do what we call a proctored exam, where we actually use somebody remotely to monitor people as they do these exams in their own homes or whatever? So there's a number of different options that you might come across. Reports, reflections, okay? Big reflection in the final year project, 50% of the overall mark for the module. How many of you, let's just see a show of hands, have done a reflection so far? 3 of you, 4 of you. Okay. It's really critical that you understand how reflections should be written. Okay, that it's not about the successes and the that you've had. It's about your own particular learning journey, what you've done well, what you haven't done so well, what you've learned from that process. Dissertations, maybe. You're not going to come across those, I don't think, this year. But certainly if you go forward to masters, then you may have a dissertation to do, and that's where the research elements come in. Short answer exam questions, group assessments, journals, blogs, okay? Part of the final year project this year, especially with Canvas being new, is that there's a wiki type blog page on your group pages on Canvas. That's an opportunity for you to get some formative feedback from your supervisor by putting in your thoughts and using it like a group diary. Posters you're going to come across in the final year project this year as well. So that's where you present your research, the work that you've done in poster format, in visual format, and that takes certain skills that you may not have used before. Pitches and presentations. Hopefully we're going to be able to do those next semester as well. So there's lots of skills, different skills that you need for different types of assessment. And it's the same in the world of work. So from an employability perspective, if you can achieve well at different types of assessment, it shows that you can achieve well at various different situations that you're going to come across from a job perspective. Okay, so we're going to do a quick Slido poll, and the guys in the other room are going to be part of this as well. Okay, so if you get your computers out or your tablets or whatever, if you join at that hashtag number 85006, and I just want to see a breakdown really, some of the most common types of assessment there. What you believe that you're best at. You can make up to 3 choices, by the way, as well. So if you can't decipher between a number, then you can make it different ones. Okay. I think this is going to be really interesting. Okay, I'm just going to share that because I don't think the guys in the other room can actually see it at the moment. Okay, so interestingly, but not surprisingly, right at the top, we've got the old favourite, the academic essay that you do individually, followed by reports, coursework. Oh, no, sorry, I tell a lie. Exam right at the very top, followed by academic essay. That doesn't surprise me, as I said, in the slightest, because a lot of this is what you're used to from school. Okay, you're used to doing exams. You're used to the stress, believe it or not, of being in an exam situation. And a lot of people will thrive from that perspective. You're used to coursework. Okay, going back to before they had GCSEs, so about 1990-ish, before 1990, there was no coursework involved in school, certainly not at a summative perspective. Okay, they'd be giving you things to do like homework and all that sort of stuff, but it wouldn't actually go towards your final mark. So everything was actually based on that examination. But as things have progressed over the last 30 years, then essays and reports, people are getting more used to that. So let's look at the other end, the bottom end. Presentations, that's an interesting one. That's quite high, 30% like individual presentations, but only 7% like group presentations. We'll come back to that in a minute because there's a correlation with anything to do with, from a group perspective there. Look, group coursework, 7%. Okay, practical real life assessment is quite high. So what we mean by that is like the final year project, you know, you're actually going out and doing something and applying the learning. Anyone like to venture a guess as to why we have an issue with group work? Yes. Okay, so just for people in the other room who might not have heard that, people get frustrated when people don't do the work that they're supposed to do. Okay, anything else? Or was that the big one? Clashing ideas. Some people want to do things in a different way. Yep. Yes. Meeting together regularly. And again, with the situation with COVID at the moment, that's going to cause problems, potential problems, okay, that you need to get over. So there's a number of different things, okay, but it's, if I was to pull all of those into one word, I'd call that control. Okay, we are letting something that is important to us as people, certainly to you as students, because your mark depends on it, to basically give control of that, or a degree of control, to somebody else who may not be as you believe, conscientious as yourself, or do it in the way that you think that you're going to do it. Yeah, is that a fair thing to say, do you think? So it's about control, and we're all control freaks. We want to have control over our own destiny. And we understand that, which is why a lot of the modules that you have that will have group work elements in, the group work will be the lower proportion of the overall mark. Okay, so 40% with the final year project compared to 50 for the individual reflection. All right. Group work is important. It actually fits into that Venn diagram that I showed you about the formative and the summative. Yes, there's summative assessment going on there because we are judging you against the learning outcomes that we have here as a school, but also against the CMI framework, the learning outcomes as well. Okay, but there's a formative element to it as well, because when you guys go off into the world of work and you are put into a group with somebody that, or people that you've never worked with before, with people that you may not get on with, that people don't have the same work ethic as you, how do you manage that? How do you control that? Because the organization that you're working in is only going to be interested primarily in the results that that group actually provides. So that's where things such as Tuckman's theory is really important, okay? The forming, storming, norming and performing. So marking criteria. How do we go into marking? How do we approach it? Very rarely now is the work that is submitted on a module marked by one person, okay? There's usually a team of people that are marking that. So final year project again, as an example, because it's relevant to you, you will have a group supervisor. Your group supervisor will not mark your assessments. They will be paired up with somebody else in the supervisory team who will mark your assessments. And there will be a swap from that perspective. So it remains objective. They're also, as you know, internally moderated. So somebody from outside the teaching team looks at them, and externally moderated as well. So from a module coordinator's perspective and from a marker's perspective, it is critical for us to make sure that the marks that we give compared to somebody else are standardized, okay? They are essentially standards of judgment, as it says there, for the assignment set. Rubrics are one of the main ways that we do this. And it's a guide to marking against those standards and those learning objectives. So the rubric is always set out so that you've got a list of the learning objectives and various different boxes that show whether or not those learning objectives have been not hit at all, hit in an excellent way, or somewhere in between. So most of your, if not all of your modules will have a rubric in the handbook, okay? Table format. It is essential for us to have that, so that especially if there are groups of people marking, that we can make sure that if I give a mark at 65% for a piece of work, then somebody close to me is going to, working on the same team, is going to be within 3 or 4% of me. And also the moderator is going to be within 3 or 4%. So it's essential from a moderation process to make sure that quality is maintained. And the external examiner looks at the rubrics, looks at the handbook, looks at the assessments to make sure that they are fit for purpose. And then just before the examination boards, they come in for a day, a scrutiny day, and they'll go through samples usually of people's work to make sure that the marking is standardized. So if you are being taught by somebody but not being marked by somebody, then there should be little or no variation to the mark that you would have got. So from your perspective, if you've got sight of the rubrics in advance, then you'll be able to clearly see what we are going to be marking you on, okay? So there's a planning and preparation element in there that gives you, as it says there, the ability to take control of your learning, but also the ability to, once you've completed a piece of work, to try and detach yourself from that work a little bit and mark it as if you were reading it for the first time. So does it meet this criteria? And if you're being objective and honest with yourself when you are reviewing, proofreading your piece of work, then you can see specifically the areas that you need to improve on. I always say to students, look at the first criteria, okay, the 2-1 and the first criteria. Make sure that you actually aim for that. Now, in some areas, you are going to be naturally weaker than the others, but this is why feedback from the marker, feedback from your supervisor, your lecturer is so important, because you can go to them and you can say, right, I don't understand this. This isn't working for me. How can I improve? Okay, so it's that two-way relationship. You should be able to look at the mark given to you, okay, and be able to assess why you've actually been given that mark. certainly all of the modules that I teach, on Turnitin, there's a rubric tab. Has anybody found that? Put your hand up if you've actually found the rubric tab on Turnitin before. It has a number of sliders on it that go up to 5, usually, and 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, and all of the learning criteria are on there. And what we do when we mark is we move those sliders, so you can immediately see from the rubric what mark you've been given and how that mark has actually been made up. I'm guessing that a lot of you don't know about that. Okay, so something to have a look out for when you look at the next piece of work that you've had feedback on. Detailed marking criteria and rubrics can offer an initial narrative and framework for feedback. So this is what we base our feedback on. Is the rubric. So yeah, you know, perhaps quality of writing is not quite there. You know, your punctuation, your spelling, your grammar, all that sort of stuff, because we look at that. That's one of the usually one of the criteria that's in the rubric. But your thoughts, your analysis is quite good. So you'd be able to see the disparity there. Okay, so it is important to understand what the rubric is and how you actually get feedback on it. So different types of assessment. What skills? I mentioned about the skills that we need to be able to demonstrate. Planning, absolutely critical. Okay. Some of the modules I teach, I actually get students to produce a mind map, either on a program like Jetstream or Mindstream or something like that, and assess that, because a picture such as that gives me a really good overview of what people's thought processes are. So one of the modules that I teach, entrepreneurship, creativity, and practice, one of the assessments is actually based around a mind map. But for planning your own assessments, there's no better way of doing this. It works for the vast majority of types of assessments. So your revision, if you are doing an exam at one end, to constructing a group report. Different colors maybe for who's going to do what. So you can see an overall view of the task as a whole. And it does help you there, as it says, to develop that logical structure. For essays, headings, okay. One of the modules, or one of the weeks in TB2 that you're going to have for the final year project is going to be all about how you structure your group report, or how you structure your reflection. Having headings gives you that easy structure that allows you, in essence, to fill those gaps in. Lists of things that potentially you want to talk about. This is a really important one. It's one of the key elements that we look at in anything above level 5 on the qualifications framework. So level 5 is year 2 of a degree. Level 6 is what you are now. Level 7 is master's. Level 8 is doctorate. That you can look at a question. So especially if you get a question that says critically analyze, okay, or discuss, you need to look at both sides of that argument and come up with your own reasons why you want to go to one side of the argument or another. That's where you get the good marks. That's where the analysis actually comes from. Flowcharts. Really simple flowchart there. Okay, so lamp doesn't work. Is it plugged in? Yes or no? Is the bulb burnt out? Yes or no? Etc. Okay, so this is going into the way that computers work. Flowcharts are used as a programming tool to develop programs and allow programmers to write code. A visual, again, if you're anything like me, I'm a visual learner. A visual portrait, really, of what your project is, what your assessment is, can give you a great structure to be able to write. There are very few people around, okay, that can sit down in front of a computer, start writing without any notes or any tools such as this, and produce a high quality piece of work. What happens is you end up rambling. Okay, the argument gets lost, your analysis gets lost. Look at the title of the essay. So this, you'll have been told this right at the very start of your degree, but it's good to be reminded. The wording of the question is going to tell you what's required. Okay, so that along the lines of, you know, critically analyze, discuss, okay, disseminate, those type of words. What's the topic? What is the subject matter and the context of the essay? It may be just on one element that you've been taught during that module. Doesn't mean that you can't bring other facets of that module in to help you, but focusing on what the context of that essay is and what the topic is really important. Which aspects of the topic are included? Again, focus, okay, it gives you the opportunity to focus on that particular area, but also think about the wider context. Yeah, so if you're being given a question on, let's say, I don't know, taxation, if any of you are doing finance modules, okay? So if you're given a question on taxation, yes, and taxation is the key topic that you need to be focusing on. But what other elements do you think might also be relevant to that? The legal aspects, maybe, but you're not focusing on the legal aspects. In fact, you're focusing on the taxation. Okay, the elements of calculation, yes, important, but you aren't actually focusing on that one particular topic. So don't go off on tangents. What topics aren't included, in other words? Okay, limit the scope of the discussion. Make sure it's as focused and as accurate as possible. So make sure you understand the essay question, the title. If this is something that's adding on to a previous assignment, make sure you look at the feedback that you received from your last assignment or from the formative feedback, from the formative assessment that you had previously, and go on to make a plan, but highlight elements that you may think that you're going to have problems with, okay, or challenges with, okay, because that then will allow you to get extra feedback from the module coordinator, the lecturer, and also to highlight the areas that potentially you need to concentrate on a little bit more. That's why we have office hours at the end of the day. And again, I can't tell you how many office hours that I've sat in when nobody has actually knocked on the door at all. And all my colleagues are the same. Those office hours are there for a reason, okay? Sit down and write.
Okay, the screens stop sharing.
Is it?
Yeah, in the room down here.
Okay.
It's like the little screens in the corner. You can see it on that, but can't see on the big screen.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Go and have a look and see if that's all right.
I'll come back with you.
Yeah, brilliant, thanks. The wonders of technology, eh? Brilliant, thanks. Okay, so just sit down and start writing. when I've done my own dissertations, that's the first thing you've got to do, is just actually sit down, start writing, because you can always edit back. Okay. Don't write to the word limit. Now that's an interesting one, because what most people will do is look at the word limit. Let's say for, again, final year projects, I'm using it because it's my example. You've got a 6,000 word assignment. So most people will look at that and think, right, okay, I'm going to chop that up into chunks, which is a really good way of doing it. So 2,000 on an introduction, 2,000 on the meat, 2,000 on a conclusion, just to give you an example. What tends to happen though is that you end up stunting the amount that you could put in, because you might think to yourself, okay, well, I'm coming up to 1,800 words on my introductory bit now, but I've got a lot more to say. So what I always say to people is, don't worry about the word count to start off with, just write. Let's say it's a 6,000 word and you end up with 7,500 words. A lot of people would then panic, but what that then gives you the ability to do is to edit that piece of work back. Okay, look for elements where you've perhaps repeated yourself, or if you're using filler type words. This is my big thing all the time. Okay, instead of saying, I don't know, I walked to the door and opened it, I would go into great detail about, I put one step in front of the other. I was looking around the room, I noticed that the door had a handle, I pulled the handle down. So are you just using words to fill things out? Gives you the ability to actually cut that back. And identify sources to use. So the module handbook, again, will give you the starting point in terms of recommended reading, but it will also not tell you everything, because we couldn't put everything in there. Okay, so go to the library. I know it's difficult at the moment, but they are available to be emailed. Look for other pieces of literature, journal articles, and so on that will support what you are trying to say. This one at the bottom, keeping track of references. Who has problems with that? How do you do it? Just out of interest, how do you keep track of the references? Go on. Yeah. Great. Okay. So I tend to use a Mac quite frequently. Okay. So if you've got a Mac, then there is a piece of software that you can download from the App Store called Reference Tracker, which is really good. Okay, and it works with APA referencing. There's a lot. There's Mendeley. OneNote is another one. Not OneNote. Can't think of the one off the top of my head. It's gone out of my head. But there's a number out there that you can actually use. Okay, as you're writing, as you are citing something, put that citation into the reference tracker. Okay, it will then produce and build up your bibliography for you. Make it easy for yourself. A lot of people will just write it in a notebook, believe it or not, or will have a separate page at the end. But what we tend to find then is that the consistency of the referencing can be a little bit off. Okay, so you can make sure by using one of these tools that the referencing is consistent throughout the bibliography. Structuring the essay, again, you've done loads now, so you know you're in your final year, but the whole focus needs to be around the title of the question. Always write the introduction last. Who does that? Or do you write it first? Let's see a show of hands. Who writes it first? Most of you, yeah. Why do you think writing it last might be an interesting idea, interesting way to do it?
Because at that point you already know what the essay will actually
and the structure of it. Okay, so it's the same as, again, what I teach, business planning. You always write the executive summary last, the bit that people are going to read as the abstract to the business plan, because it gives you an overview of everything that you've already done. Again, keep it short, an introductory paragraph rather than an extended introduction. Gives you more space to be able to, and more word count to be able to get into the meat of the question. Develop your argument, line of reasoning. In other words, make sure that you show to us that you have looked at all sides of the argument. Both sides, there may be 3 or 4 sides to the argument. Okay, so at least 2 sides. Include relevant examples, evident quotations. Okay, so this is showing us, again, that you've read around the subject, that you understand it from other people's work. Signposting, so lead up to the next paragraph and so on. So you're linking points. And again, use subsections. That's fine, okay, to show that you've thought about things logically, but you've also organized your work effectively. So that's helping you as well. The conclusion is where most people fall down, believe it or not. That bit in bold up there, the conclusion should include no new material. If it's new and you're introducing it for the first time, it's not part of the conclusion. Okay, it should summarize your argument and main themes. And remember, if you're being asked to critically analyze something, if you're being asked to discuss something, where the good marks come is when you say, person A said this, person B said that, and you're using the right referencing, but I think this, based on the knowledge that I've gained. Give the conclusions that emphasize their importance. Critically reflect on the assumptions and the limits of your own analysis in the essay. So if you think that you haven't looked enough at something, or there isn't enough information on something, then that's the place to put it in the conclusion. And then sum up your argument. So it is a process. And when we start looking at reflection, because obviously that's a big part of your final year project, there's a number of different models that you can use that are all cyclical like this. Okay, where you're analyzing the situation, you're looking for the good points, the bad points, you're looking for what you've learned, you're looking for an action plan of what you do differently next time. Exactly the same process. Okay, it's a recyclical process. So some things to avoid. Diagrams and pictures in the text tend to disrupt the flow. They're rarely used in academic writing unless you need to submit a business case or report. So that is the big difference between an essay and a report. A report will have charts, graphs, diagrams, pictures, and all that sort of stuff in it. An essay won't. An essay, you would leave all of that until the appendix. Ignorance is not an excuse. Okay, so we use APA referencing, American Psychological Association referencing here. There are loads of different types, but our systems are actually programmed so that they recognize APA referencing. So our Turnitin program recognizes the APA. Read the APA rules twice. Okay, make sure that the references and the citations, the in-text citations, are to APA standard. Okay. And again, if you have any concerns about that, the library is the best place to go. Only use long quotes if essential. Paraphrase, okay? So-and-so said, quote, and you get a paragraph. That doesn't read very well, okay? It's better to say something along the lines of, according to so-and-so's analysis, and then paraphrase it, but cite it at the end as well. Okay, that's again a big mistake that people make, is that they paraphrase, reword, but they don't reference. Generalizations, support statements that you make with literature. Okay, so especially when you're looking at, let's say, you know, with the critical analysis, the discussion, both sides of the argument, I've told you now to say what you think, but support that. Okay, so I think blah, 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 and this can be supported by what XYZ has said in this publication. Okay. Don't go over the word limit with your final draft. Okay, try and make sure that it is at the word limit. Reasons behind that are that the word limits are there, are set in place primarily to make sure that the weighting of the assessment is correct. It also makes sure that the information that you are giving is succinct as possible. Most people, if it's 10% under or 10% over, so say it's 5,000 word essay, so if you've done 5,500 words or 4,500 words, we won't worry too much about that. But you're trying to get into that 10% region. Some other things to do, read with purpose. Have a question in mind when reading and focus your reading. So we're moving more into the literature review elements now, which again is a skill that you're going to need for your final year project. What are you trying to find out? What question are you trying to answer when you're looking for literature and when you're reading? Use the marking rubric to guide your work. Okay, so analysis maybe one element. Structure of the essay maybe another element. Your insightfulness might be another. Okay, use that marking rubric to guide your work. Always, even if it doesn't ask you to, offer that critical analysis. Think about what different people are saying. Think about where you stand on an argument and why. The references, make sure that we know where your ideas and information has come from. If you find an easy to read journal, take note of the structure and style, especially if it's a research paper. Okay, what does the abstract say? How does the abstract lead into the main part of the paper? Don't rush it. Don't leave it till the last minute. Now, I'm one of the worst for doing this. Okay, I leave things until the last minute, and then I end up working into the night to make sure that I've got the time to be able to do this. But read it before you submit it, obviously. Then leave it for a day and then read it again, because your perception of that piece of work will be different. And obviously make sure you submit on time. That's a given. Okay, so the researcher's theory. 3 ways of relating to it. Okay, so there are 3 different types of research that you need to start thinking about: inductive, deductive, and post-positive research. Okay, so deductive, this is where the word deduction obviously comes from, is you actually going out there and investigating something. Okay, inductive is something that you already know that you are expanding on. And post-positive research is where there's research has actually been undertaken, that it has been successful, and you are actually taking that further ahead again. Okay, so think about those 3 different elements, what a researcher would do if they were actually writing a research paper. So just to give you a little bit more detail about that, Deductive research based on testing theories. Research cases are to some extent secondary to the theory. Often characterized from moving from the general researcher's theory to specific particular cases, so you're expanding it out. Okay. Deductive, where you take a theoretical framework already, you look at hypotheses and conjectures, you look at the factual statements out there, you collect the data, and your opinions, your perception of that data is what is important. So that is a lot of what you're actually going to be doing as part of the final year project. Inductive, the aim of generating the researcher's theory rather than testing it. Committed to being open-minded, so you don't know where your research is actually going to take you. And the aim is to be as responsive to the subject matter as possible. So you go into it with an open mind, basically, from that perspective. I'm not going to go through all of this in detail because it isn't really relevant at this stage for you. This is, okay, theory and everyday examples. Some of the questions you need to be asking yourself. So, is your example related to the organization or the project that you're actually working on? Again, really useful for the final year project. Is it specific enough? Have you found reliable resources? Has it been peer reviewed, for instance? Are you avoiding simplistic generalizations that you can't actually back up? And what are you planning to do with the description of your example? Okay, so how does that actually move forward? How does it actually show what you were trying to answer as a question? Fair assessment. Okay, so how do we make sure that it's fair? Standardization, key element there, okay, and that's where the rubric obviously comes in. Team approaches to marking. Sometimes we will actually share pieces of work around the marking team. So, for instance, if I think something is a borderline first, and I'm giving it a 70%, for instance, but not 100% sure, then I will give it to somebody else to have a quick look at, just to confirm. So that perspective is it's not part of the marking process, but it's something that we all do to make sure that we're on the right track. Double marking happens sometimes as well. So this is where a piece of work is assessed by two members of staff. Dissertations at master's level, for instance, in the school are double marked. Sampling. So all work is assessed by at least one member of staff, but some are sampled by a second marker to ensure standardization. So that's the moderation process that we go through. So we look at between 20 and 30% of each grade range, and somebody from outside of the teaching team will take a look at those and will either agree or disagree with those. Okay, and that's the moderation process. Exam boards, as I've mentioned, so these meet after the assessments are completed, and this is where final marks are agreed upon. Okay, so we actually have sitting exam boards here, which are chaired by Professor Katrina Pritchard, who's our Director of Learning and Teaching, and the standing dean at the moment. Yeah, the external examiners are part of that as well. So as it says there, they come in from separate universities to oversee the assessment. They'll sample as well in this university, they moderate, and they actually sit on the exam boards and agree those marks with us. So there's about 4 or 5 different points there that we use to make sure that A, it's fair, but B, that quality is actually maintained as well. but it's more than just about making the process fair, okay? It's about making the assessments as inclusive, accessible, and equitable as possible, okay, so that everybody can do their best. You've got a bit of a role to play in that as well, in terms of understanding from the outset what is expected of you, engaging in the formative assessment processes that are given to you. Some modules may offer a choice of assessment. Okay, so actually having that variety assessment can be quite important. Certainly, some of the accounting and finance modules now are looking at moving away from the traditional type of exam and putting you into a situation where you are using the skills that they are teaching you in a real environment. The feedback process. Student engagement with feedback is promoted, and we can actually tell, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we can tell whether or not you've read feedback. We can tell if you've looked at your grade. We can tell if you've looked at the in-text feedback that you get on Turnitin. We can also tell if you've actually looked at the main bank of feedback in there. Okay, so like as I said, there's a tab for the rubric. There's also a tab for a main piece of feedback as well, in addition to the in-text stuff. It's also worth noting that some of us, not me, but some of us do actually do audio feedback that you can play back through Turnitin. Okay. The feedback that we give you is for learning. So we're not trying to say this piece of work is rubbish. You haven't done anything to show us what the learning objectives are. What we're trying to do is to highlight areas that you can actually improve. So to build you up rather than to knock you down. Feedback that's clearly communicated to students, okay? So you're going to know what type of feedback you're going to receive and when. And this can go a little bit awry sometimes because different people provide different levels of feedback and different structures, but it's something that we are looking to standardize within the school. The other thing which really winds you guys up, and I know this, is when we are late providing the marks back to you. So just to give you an example, we get 3 weeks in general from the point that you submit to the point that the marks are released. If you get into a situation where some of us are actually marking on perhaps 2 or 3 modules and they're all in at the same sort of time, or somebody's ill, then that can cause that the release of marks to be pushed back. But that should always be communicated to you at the earliest possible time. It's consistently delivered. Okay, so again, this is something that we pick up from the student surveys, is that the feedback that you may get on something that is, let's say, quantitative, that is numerical, compared to something that you get as qualitative, there is going to be a difference between the two. But in general, we're trying to make sure that it's consistently delivered and that quality is maintained. So assessment drives is for learning. Feedback, this is just a summary really. Feedback is always there to identify your strengths and weaknesses, to improve your understanding of the subject, and to give you an element of what you need to do differently in the future if an assessment type like this came up. Some of those areas of feedback are going to be the same across the board, no matter what level of or what type of module you were actually doing. Okay, so for instance, if it's to do with structure of an essay or spelling and grammar or something along those lines, it's going to be the same for a number of different modules. Feedback is always formative, even when given on summative assessments. What do you think that means? It's a bit confusing, isn't it? When we're talking about the difference between formative and summative assessments. What do you think the word formative means? It's about forming you guys. It's about developing you guys. So feedback, okay, is about not telling you where you've gone wrong, okay, but telling you how you should improve, what you need to do to develop and to form yourselves moving forward. So we have to make sure that the feedback that you receive is relevant and specific. Okay, it's constructive and motivating. And if any of you ever get any feedback that says, "Oh, this is a rubbish piece of work," blah blah blah, I want you to come and see me immediately, because that isn't constructive. Okay, we always look at what you've done well, what you haven't done so well, and what you need to change in the future. So that's the three-step process that we look at as academics to give you feedback. Okay, so usually I would do this as an activity, as a group activity, but obviously we can't do that. So what I'd like you to do is to take 5 minutes. Just look at those 3 statements there. Okay, and I want you to think about what should be referenced, what shouldn't be referenced. Is it correct? And the way that it's actually been written. So just make some notes on that. I'd like you to spend about 5 minutes on it. And I will then give some feedback on those 3 sections. Okay. I'm just going to go next door. You can talk to each other, by the way, if you want to discuss it. But obviously just don't maintain the social distance, okay? Have any of you had any problems accessing any of the videos on Canvas? No? Okay, there seems to be a bit of a problem with some of the video stuff at the moment. So if you do, if you can let student experience team or SOM support know, that would be great. Okay. Right, I'm going to flick backwards and forwards between these two. Okay. So number one. So just so you can see that this is one about school leavers. So it refers to two different studies. So you need to cite both of those. Okay. You have some flexibility about where the citation should go. For example, the relevant citations could also have been placed after the word study in line 1 and 4. The important point is to make the connection between the statement and the source and make it as clear as possible. Okay, so just to read that out, a major study of British school leavers concluded that parents had a major influence on the kind of work entered by their children. Who said that? That's the question that we ask ourselves all the time, okay, when we're marking. The children were influenced over a long period of time by the values and ideas and the work of their parents, okay. A later study reached the same conclusion. Who made the study? Who said that? Okay, so there's two separate points in there and two separate studies. Who got that? Did you identify that? Great. Okay, so let's look at the second one. Climatologists generally agree that the 5 warmest years since the late 19th century have been within the decade 1995 to 2005. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this one. The sources of all statistics and information originating from named sources should always be fully referenced. Okay. So anything to do with that, because the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration and the World Meteorological Organization. Okay. Also, you need to put dates in that as well, because there may have been 2 or 3 later or earlier studies. So you need to make sure that there are dates in there. So it's been argued that federalism is a way of making sense of large organizations, and that power and responsibility that drives federalism is a feature of developed societies and can be extended in a way forward of managing modern businesses. Okay, what do you think is the issue with that? Yeah.
Well, they haven't given a reference to the quote that you actually argued that point.
Okay.
And then explain why it's the feature of the society.
Yep. Yeah. That's the big one. Okay, so if you use the term that's been argued, you need to cite who has actually presented that argument. Again, who said that? As a quotation is included, you can show the source of the argument and the quotation. So that can actually be done in one reference, assuming obviously that they're taken from the same source. If the quotation is taken from a printed source, make sure that using the APA referencing, you're showing the page number, the author's name, year of publication, etc., etc. Okay. It is also possible for you to put short form, okay, referencing. So handy 1996, page 32. But if you do that in the bibliography, the full reference needs to actually be given in the bibliography. Okay, so that's just something to remind you guys of exactly what we're looking for when we're looking at referencing. Okay, there's some additional reading for you there. How I became a straight A student by following these seven rules. That's a really, really good article, actually. Okay, I'd recommend you read that. Okay, and what I'd like to do, just to finish off, is to look at any questions and answers that you guys may have. Okay, so again, going back to Slido, using the questions tab. If there are any questions, please type them in there. If there are not, then don't worry about it. That's fine. You can email these across to me at a later time. So we'll give that a few seconds to see if there are any. Okay, I think we're done. Guys, thank you for your attention. Next program workshop will be in week 11. Okay, so that's teaching week 10. Yeah, teaching week 10. So that's the first week in December. Okay, for you guys, it will be a session on employability. So please make sure that you attend that. We'll have the employability team, speaking to you about, their experience of assessment centres and all that sort of stuff. So things that you're going to collide with over the next couple of months. If there are any questions from a program perspective, please come and see me. Level 6, I am your year tutor as well. So if there are any issues, either send me an email or come along to my office hours, which are in the MN3000 handbook, but they're also on the Level 6 hub as well. Okay, Thursdays and Fridays, my office hours are. Okay, guys, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. No, you don't have to wipe it down after. This is only when you come in. All right, no problem.